Hi, I'm Judah Mischel, and you're listening to The Thread, powered by Meaningful Minute. Teshuva is not hard. All too often misunderstood, Teshuva is really a positive process. Hashem's way of expressing His desire for us to strengthen our relationship with Him together. Reorienting our perspective, our understanding, and appreciation of Teshuva, we can come to see it as an expansive opportunity for growth, presenting us with a whole new way, a meaningful appreciation for Yiddishkeit. These 5 steps, outlined by the tzaddik, the Rebbe Ruzhiner of Anapoli, represent and reframe Teshuva as a positive experience, leading to a greater sense of self-awareness, simchas hachayim, a deeper relationship with Ribono Shel Olam and with each other. Welcome to The Thread on Teshuva. Every one of us is a work in progress. Teshuva is a process of discovery as well as a process of recovery. It's also about uncovery, working through all sorts of external layers that have just kind of piled up on top of us, slowly but surely, effortlessly removing that which we perceive to hold us back, that which separates us from who we hope to one day become, whether it's in the world of midos or specific nisyonos, challenges. Reb Zusha's system addresses it. The Rebbe Reb Zusha was part of the spiritual fraternity of the Maggid of Mizrich, one of the important Talmidei Baal Shem Tov. He was a tzaddik who was renowned for his Yiras Shamayim and for his humility. And Reb Zusha's down-to-earth holiness and relatable eitzos. Unlike pumpkin spice lattes and wearing white until Labor Day, Reb Zusha's mahalach makes Teshuva season all year round. It's an acronym. Teshuva stands for 5 psukim. The Taf is Tamim tia im Hashem Elokecha, to be simple, innocent, wholehearted with Hashem. The Shin of Teshuva stands for Shivisi Hashem Lenegdi Tamid, to place Hashem before my eyes constantly, to have a continuous sense of being before God. The Vav of Teshuva is V'ahavta l'recha kamocha, the golden rule, cultivating love. B'chol d'rachecha da'ehu, the Beis of Teshuva, is to know God in all of our ways expansively. And finally, the Hey, the last letter of Teshuva, represents Hatznei aleches im el Hashem Elokecha, to walk modestly with our God. The acronym of Teshuva is actually a methodology. It's instructions for an inner roadmap, not just how to do Teshuva, but how to live consciously in the constant presence of Hashem in every single facet of our lives. Baderech, living life in process, is about trying to work the roadmap, trying to follow Reb Zusha's instructions and personally and spiritually advance toward the goal of living Yiddishkeit with vitality, joyously and consciously. One of the mistakes we make is that Teshuva is a reaction to a sin, to a mistake, to a failure. Teshuva is not just something that we do in the face of Aveira. The great tzaddik, the Rebbe Simcha Bunim from Shischa, once said that it's understandable that people do averos. I mean, we make mistakes. It's the way HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the world. We're human beings. After all, there's temptations and we're surrounded by distractions. Like silver that becomes tarnished. It's the reality of the environment of what's taking place. There's a chemical reaction with sulfites in the air that tarnish the beauty of the silver. People make mistakes. We fall short of our expectations. The Rebbe Rabbunim said that's understandable, and that's what we have the system of Teshuva for. It's forgivable. But what's almost unforgivable is that while HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives us the opportunity to be metchadesh, to start again, to do Teshuva at any given time, we don't avail ourselves of this incredible gift, of this constant opportunity to draw close to Hashem, to repair our relationship with the Ribono Shel Olam. You would say that in the Beis Din Shel Mala, we break it, we bought it, we'll be held accountable for our mistakes and for our averos, but much more so, we'll be held accountable for the fact that we didn't take advantage of the opportunity of drawing close to Hashem and fixing that which we've damaged through the process of Teshuva. This is for Elul, Tishrei, and all year round. And it's not difficult. Ki ha-mitzvah azos asher anochi mitzavcha hayom lo nifleisi mimcha. It's not hidden away from you. V'lo rechoka hi. It's not far away from you. Lo b'shamayim hi. It's not up in the heavens. V'lo me'ever hayam. It's not on the other sides of the seas. But tshuva is called karov elecha hadavar ma'od b'ficha u'bilvavcha la'asoso. This mitzvah of tshuva it's right before us. B'ficha, in our mouths, in the way we speak. Bilvavcha, in our hearts and our thoughts. La'asoso, in our actions for us to do. It's an opportunity that awaits us and that's before us constantly. Reb Zusha's pathway, Reb Zusha's acronym, his mahalach, presents us with touchstones, positive steps to embrace this path of tshuva in a way which is manageable, which is understandable, value-driven, and most importantly, through the context and prism of positive steps that will help us cultivate a more real and vibrant relationship with the Ribbono Shel Olam. The first step in Reb Zusha's acronym and Reb Zusha's methodology is Tamim Tia im Hashem Elokecha, tough of tshuva, to be sincere with Hashem, our God. The first step in his prescription is to begin with Tamimus, simplicity, sincerity, to live wholeheartedly. That's what forms the backbone of Jewish practice. Positive growth begins with honesty, heartfulness, and an earnest desire to create lasting change. The first step in Reb Zusha's path to tshuva begins by emphasizing the essential element of our kesher, of our chibur, of our connectivity with the Ribbono Shel Olam, with Hashem, which is the same as any element. It's the same as any sacred relationship, of any kesher. Sincerity, honesty, being real and being completely present, being natural and real, being who we are. The Ramban calls Tamim Tia a mitzvah saseh, to not anticipate anything or anyone other than the Ribbono Shel Olam in the here and now, to be completely present and embrace where we are and what's happening around us. Tamimus implies childlike purity, innocence. There was a great tzaddik in the last generation named Reb Avram Aronovich. He was one of the hidden tzaddikim of Yerushalayim, in the secret society of the Baba Sali. He was a mystic and also a lamdan, someone who spent his days and nights learning B'Ritzifus. He would learn for 8 hours straight without eating, drinking, speaking, and then do yichudim with the secrets of the Arizal in the mikveh during the day, during the night. He tells the Maisa of a chassid who was a very wealthy man, who was a Talmud and a chassid of the Mischel Rebbe, the second Lubavitcher Rebbe, the son of the Alter Rebbe. This Gvir had a son who was terribly chutzpahdik, who had rebelled in a very intense way, and it was painful for the family. And whenever there's rebellion, it's more painful for the individual themselves. And his father, the parents were beside themselves. He'd completely left all trappings of frumkeit, of Yiddishkeit, of observance, of practice, and was just aggressive and at war with the world around him. It was to the point that it was debasing and embarrassing. And the father asked his Rebbe, asked the Mittler Rebbe, Reb Dov Ber from Lubavitch, tell me, what can I do? Can you give him a bracha? Is there some tikkun you can make to do something? And interestingly, the Mittler Rebbe referred him elsewhere. He said, sounds like for your son, you have to speak to the Ruzhiner, Rebbe Yisrael of Ruzhin. Rebbe Yisrael of Ruzhin was an anikel of the Maggid of Mezrich, who the Mittler Rebbe was named for, ironically, all part of the same Beis Medrash and same fellowship. He said, go to the Ruzhiner, bring your son to the Ruzhiner. The Ruzhiner will have an approach, have a way to help him, to help you, to help him chart his path. I mean, this guy looks at his Rebbe, the Mittler Rebbe, and he says, I don't think my son is interested in going to visit a Rebbe. I could barely get him to come to sit with us on Pesach Seder. And he showed up and ate bread by my Pesach table, by the Seder. The Ruzhiner, the Mittler Rebbe said, take him to the Ruzhiner. You don't remember, you don't know. See, the avoda in Ruzhin was very different than the rest of the Talmidei Baal Shem Tov. By Ruzhin, there was a tremendous focus on avoda b'gashmius. There was an appreciation for the finer things. It was deliberate, meaning everything was looked good. dressed well. They used their wealth and materialism to express kvod shamayim. I mean, what did Hashem put the gold and silver and nice looking furnishings in the world for other than for kvod shamayim? He said, take him to the Ruzhiner. Your son will be impressed by the wealth. Tell him it's a business trip and that the Ruzhiner is going to potentially invest in business. Money will speak to him. That's also part of his taivas. Maybe, see if you could bring him to the Ruzhiner. He'll be impressed. The Ruzhiner lived on a palatial estate and had its servants and ate off of silver and gold. They say that even his shoes were very fancy, but there was no sole underneath, that he literally walked on gravel. So the father says, "Okay, what am I going to do? I have no other recourse." So he goes to his son and he says, "I have an idea. We're going to fly first class. We're going to go on a fancy coach. We're going to eat well. But I want to take you to the Ruzhiner. We're going to see maybe he'll be interested in investing in one of our projects." So the son says, "Always down for a road trip." So they get together. They head off to meet the tzaddik, the Ruzhiner. When they get there, the father says, "Listen, I'm going to go inside and have some adult kind of talk. I'm just going to get in there and flex, let him know where we're up to, our portfolio, our worth, and I'll do the heavy lifting, and then I'll bring you in. You'll come in for the second part of the conversation, and like that." So it says, "Great, no problem." He was happy to sit in the waiting room. There's good snacks there. It was a beautiful spot. This Yid goes in to see the Ruzhiner. He's opened up and he has a kvittel with his son's name. And before he can even open his mouth and hand the Rebbe the kvittel, he broke down in tears. He said, "Rebbe, please just help me. My son," he handed the Rebbe the kvittel. The Rebbe already understood exactly what the story was. He said, "My son is just struggling so badly. He's so brokenhearted. I don't know what to do. He's so far off from what he used to be and what he wanted to be. Please, can you help?" The Ruzhiner looked at him and said, "Of course, let's bring him inside." So a couple minutes later, the father goes out to the waiting room and brings in his kid, his son, his rebellious son. And the son walks in with real swagger. He sees the Ruzhiner in his beautiful throne at his fancy table and is totally impressed. But he understands that he's not here for a business meeting. He gets it. He gets it. The Ruzhiner stands up around the table and puts his arm around this young man. He says, "I'm so happy that you came to meet me. Welcome." He said, "Can I show you around a little bit? I want to, have a nice crib here. I'd like to, show you a little bit what's what." The kid says, "Of course, it would be my great pleasure." He takes him down this big palatial hallway with tall ceilings. And on the walls of the hallway, it's ceiling to floor, ornate mirrors. He takes him in front of the first mirror and puts his hand around his arm, and they look together into the mirror. And this young man sees himself as in his current state. And he sees himself sitting at his parents' Pesach Seder with a loaf of bread. And he sees in that vision his mother just brokenhearted, completely shattered. He sees his father disappointed, and the kids, he sees his siblings looking at him with disgust. He senses the embarrassment and the hurt that he's caused people, and he's seeing all of his averos, all of the arayos, and all of the low places that he's been in, and all of the painful and hurtful places that he's gone to, and all of the pain and suffering that he's caused in the world. And he sees that the treif of food and the Chil Shabbos, and it's awful to look at. To come face to face with all of that avera and all of that negativity and that tumah was just hard. He winced at the vision of himself. When the Ruzhiner understood that he had seen what he looked like in that first mirror, he took him by the hand gently and said, "Continue down the hallway till they get to a second large mirror." And there in front of that second large mirror, he saw himself a couple of years earlier. A couple of years earlier, he saw himself, walking out of his parents' house, taking off his yarmulke and putting it into his pocket. And he saw himself, coming to socialize outside of shul on Friday night, dressed nicely, and then going out to a place of ill repute, to a pub, to a bar with his friends, with his Goyish friends afterwards. It's hard to see, but but he's looking at himself, and he recognized somebody who was just struggling and confused and in the early states of rebellion. His mother making him a suda to sit in the sukkah, and him sitting there and eating without washing and without making a leishev b'sukkah, and his parents looking at him a little bit funny, and then saying, "Oh wait, I forgot to make the bracha." When he recognized himself in that second mirror from a few years earlier, the Ruzhiner took him by the shoulder and put his arm around him and said, "Let's continue. I can show you the rest of my house." And they go to the next mirror, and in front of that next mirror, this young man sees himself as a bar mitzvah boy, wearing his tefillin for the first time, and he remembered this beautiful scene of the bagel breakfast and whatever happened there with all the friends and parents like feeling proud of him, and you see him there kind of fidgeting, comfortable-ish, not totally. And he saw himself during that stage of life, like sometimes coming to school and just putting on the shel rosh and covering up his arm with the shel yad and sitting there kind of angry and off-putting. And he saw himself sitting there, with his friends, talking, using nivel peh, starting to curse, and then kind of going back to school and trying to understand and trying to follow, but not really going. And he was looking at it, and it was hard to see. He remembers that awkward, painful stage of wanting so badly to please his parents and his rabbeim, but knowing that he couldn't do it. He couldn't do it. And then the Ruzhiner understood that he saw, and he took him to the next mirror. In the next mirror, he saw himself a few years earlier, a 7-year-old playing, jumping, laughing with his friends in the chatzer, in the courtyard of the cheder of the school, and he smiled, and it was just, wow! I remember those days, and of sitting at the table learning parsha with his father and the mother, and taking out the challahs from the oven and participating. And it was just like this refreshing feeling, and then he was filled with such sadness and hurt, and he slouched over and started to hold his head and shake his head and look at the Ruzhiner, saying, "Oh, like what happened? Like what happened? Like what happened?" When the Ruzhiner understood that he had seen himself as a 7-year-old, in that time he put his arm around him and moved him to the fifth mirror, to the final mirror. And there, this young man came face to face with himself as a child by his upshur. He just gotten his hair cut, had his new payas, and he saw his mother glowing, and his grandparents, who were alive still at that time, with such nachas. And that the father putting his talis katan on his tzitzis, his first pair of tzitzis, filled with promise and freshness and newness. It was just this joyful, incredible, beautiful, simple moment. And then he saw his father and mother so proudly, like standing next to him, take out the aleph beis, the little honey on it. And as he saw himself as a pure, innocent, young, beautiful, happy child, a 3-year-old, licked the letters of the aleph beis, he broke down in tears. He couldn't bear seeing himself. He couldn't bear seeing himself in such a way. It was just so hard to come face to face with what he was and who he had become. And when he crumbled to the floor and totally broken and exhausted, the Ruzhiner summoned his father to come in. And the way that Rabbi Avram Aronovich Zatzal tells the Maisa, the way he would tell over the Maisa, was that the Ruzhiner stood there, the tzaddik stood there with father and with son, and asked them to look into the mirror all together. See, for us, we often relate to Teshuva as a process where we have to look at all the things that we've done wrong, everything that's gone bad, everything that's gone sour, that we've spoiled, that we've broken, and we automatically look to see what our mistakes are so that we can hopefully get better. But that just spins wheels in mud and enters us into a world of negativity, of darkness, and perpetuates failure. What the tzaddikim are laying out for us, and specifically Reb Zusha, and through this Maisa, the Ruzhiner, is that Teshuva is about restoring our factory default, beginning with tamimus, with trying to help us go back and regressive, to uncover that inner child, that place of simplicity, of wholeness, of realness, of freshness, of uncovering that original tamimut, that innocent, that childlike place is called going ad ha'ava, to that original love. When we see ourselves as lacking, as bad or unworthy, it's lo na'im, it's very hard to look at. But if we are able to focus on good points and begin from a place of purity, of cleanliness, of goodness, of recognizing Elokai and Shamash and Asata Bita Orahi, that our beginning point in life and in Yiddishkeit is that we are good, that's called beginning with Tmimus, of starting from what's going right, from starting from a very real place. Kikar v'lecha davar ma'od b'ficha u'b'lvavcha la'asoso. In our hearts, bilvavcha, in our thoughts and our feelings about ourselves, beficha, in the way we speak in our language, la'asoso, and in our actions, these three dimensions of how we enter into this world of tshuva and fixing. Beficha, in our language, tmimus in speech, means speaking straight, speaking honestly from our heart. Sometimes we think that when we to sound sophisticated and to speak with chachma and with a high vocabulary and to make things nuanced and complicated, it'll help us feel good and help us draw close to Hashem. But here Rebbe is saying the opposite is true. Straight talk express. The more we could speak from the heart, like a child says what they need. One of the things Rebbe Zusha says we could learn from a child is that a child cries out when they're in pain and they say what they're really thinking. Sometimes it's a little bit embarrassing. This kid is funny. But for us, in trying to uncover our inner child, in covering that place inside of us which has remained pure and always will remain pure, we have to begin by speaking simply. Sometimes we think that speaking about nuance, about different narratives and dialectic, and there's different sides to a story, and there's different things is good and it's appropriate within relationships. But sometimes we have to just say, "Help me, save me," to be able to speak clearly and in a real way. I'm sorry, I made a mistake, I was wrong. In 1959, Rabbi Yoshe Ber Soloveitchik was diagnosed with cancer, and his daughter's wedding had to be postponed because of a procedure. And on the night before that procedure, the Rav remembered that the way that he davened, the way that he called out to Hashem was different than all the other ways that he had davened up until that point, which sometimes could be cerebral, and sometimes we can get in our own way, and sometimes it's important to be like that in davening. It's a intellectual. It could be an intellectual exercise, and sometimes we have to sort through our emotions and express them. And then there are times where a person is lying in such a situation, where we're saying, "Ribono shel olam, just help me. I want to be by my daughter's wedding. Help me, save me, bring me close to you." Ona Hashem. Tamimos restores our way of speaking to Hashem and to each other with simplicity, honestly, and directly. In our minds, in our consciousness, in our perspective, Tamimos helps us. Tamimos helps us just keep things simple, keep things pashut. The Gemara tells us in Rosh Hashanah, the more simple, the better. The more simple, the better. To simplify as much as we possibly can, and then to continue simplifying. We think that often, in order to draw close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we have to do things in a complicated way, with Chachma. It's not just Rabbi Nachman who explains Tamimus to be the most important midah in terms of our avodas Hashem. It's the Gemara. Koma de pashit, tafim alei. Everything that's pashit is better. And Reb Nosson Breslover would say about being a Talmud of Rabbi Nachman of Breslov, who spoke so much about Tmimus Upshitas. He said, I'm not worried that I didn't live with enough Tmimus Upshitas, but I hope that I lived my Tmimus Upshitas, my simplicity, simple enough. We tend to overthink, and we tend to in our adult lives think that the more we talk about something, the better it'll be. The more we present different sides, the more we'll have clarity. But the opposite is true. The opposite is true. Reb Zusha is pointing us is that a derech in tshuva is just keeping things as simple as possibly can be, because that's where we find honesty, and that's where we find innocence, and that's where we find the opportunity and the belief in ourselves that we can actually begin again with clarity. To love, I love Klal Yisrael, us and them, the difference between us and them, evil and good, between light and darkness. That's where we find our beginning point of change. Sometimes we think that, where am I going to start? There's so many things that I have to fix. There's so many places that I have to work on. What Reb Zusha is telling us is, Tamim tia em Hashem Elokecha. Tamimus means doing one thing at a time, being connected to what's in front of me and the opportunity that I have right now, the people that I'm with, the moment that I'm in. Like the Ramban says, not to predict the future, not to think about what's coming and not to think about what was, but what's right here in front of us. And what's right here in front of us is a positive opportunity to embrace our chance to fix that which we might have disturbed, or that which we might have has become tarnished by the world that we're in with our relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Tamim tia em Hashem Elokecha. The more we're able to connect to simplicity, wholeheartedness, and pashtus, tia em Hashem Elokecha, the more we'll sense our constant relationship and presence with the Ribbono Shel Olam. Make sure to download the Meaningful Minute app for bonus content and follow-up from this and other episodes.